I want to bring in our own Margaret Brennan, who is at the White House right now. Okay, Margaret, I'm somewhat confused. Maybe you can translate this for us. Yesterday, the president called this a payout to companies, the subsidies, and now we're hearing that there is potentially a bipartisan effort. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so it was interesting because at first he said there would be no bipartisan solution, unfortunately, and blamed the Democrats for the inability to get one when it comes to resolving the health care dispute. But then when pushed on this announcement that was made at the same time that we were sitting here during this press conference from Capitol Hill, that there actually had been a bipartisan proposal for a short-term fix, as the president called it, he did acknowledge that Senator Lamar Alexander had been working to do that and to reach across the aisle on that one. But the president in many ways sort of lowered the bar for that proposal. He called it just a short-term fix. He said it would last maybe 1, maybe 2 years to get us, as he said it, over the hump before coming to what he describes as the ultimate way to resolve some of the financial difficulties that Obamacare is experiencing in many states, which he said would come in the form of what looks a lot like that initial proposal from Senators Graham and Cassidy, which is to provide block grants to the states. So on a state-by-state basis, they can come up with how they want to structure the programs internally, because statewide, this is in many ways many different healthcare systems within one framework of Obamacare. So the president did acknowledge there had been some bipartisan work on this, but ultimately went back to what he said essentially will be a Trump version of Graham Cassidy as becoming law. But again, no clear timeline on that, because as he said, they have a number of big legislative pushes to get through. First of all, they have to settle on a budget. Second of all, he said tax reform, and then they will get to health care.
And Margaret, is there a sense, I know this news is just coming down, but is there a sense if other Republicans on Capitol Hill would support this, particularly the majority leader?
Well, we'll have to see. I'm sure Nancy Cordes is working that story on the Hill right now, but there is a need to deal with the immediate problems, and we'll see if the votes are there. The president, at least for what he was forecasting as his version of Graham Cassidy, he said they would have the votes, but at this point, it doesn't look like you're seeing any kind of actual vote counting until after the new year. And
also, I'm hearing Janet Yellen may potentially be at the White House sometime soon. He talked about the Fed chair and that decision. Has he reached one yet?
This is going to be a very important decision. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, in many ways, has more influence over the economic health and stability and financial infrastructure in this country than anyone else. And it's supposed to be an apolitical job. The reason it's so interesting to see Janet Yellen auditioning in many ways for the job she currently has, once again, is because how harshly she was criticized during the campaign by then candidate Trump, who really hit her hard and criticized the continued low interest rate environment we're in. And so now we know he's broadened it out. He said they've cut it to about 5 candidates. One of them was sitting right here, Gary Cohn, who is leading the president's tax reform effort. The Economic Council director and former Goldman Sachs executive is in the running, but there are a number of other names. And the president said he'll be making that decision very soon. So that will be interesting news for the market, as will the conversations here about debt relief and Greece. The president putting his shoulder behind the idea, though not getting into any kind of specifics as to what the U.S. would ask the IMF and European countries to do in terms of forgiving that substantial debt load that still is on Greece's shoulders after its financial crisis that it went through shortly after the U.S. financial crisis.
Margaret Brennan coming to us from the White House. Margaret, thank you so much for your time.